All right, good morning to everybody. We will, okay. In fact, what I will be doing today is to review both courses we have conducted so far. So this will be basically a summary of the courses, two courses we studied. Now we will start with Buddhist ethics. Here I have put all the major points we have been discussing on Buddhist ethics. And then next section will be on world religions. When we discuss Buddhist ethics, we are approaching the subject of ethics basically as a philosophical category. Now, when you look at the teaching of the Buddha, it is very important that we cannot, we have to note that we cannot compartmentalize, so we cannot really separate, sections according to philosophy, like say, for example, to say Buddhist epistemology, Buddhist metaphysics, Buddhist ethics. We are using these concepts in accordance with the philosophical categories. But then Buddha did not teach the Dhamma in that manner. Okay. If you take the entire teaching of the Buddha in a very broad manner, we can say that it is an ethical system. Ultimately concerned about what is good and what is right. So it goes up to the very end to the nirvana. So in that sense we can say entire Buddhism is Buddhist ethics really. But then here when we look at this subject in this context, we are on the one hand looking at it as a category of philosophy. So what philosophy would consider ethics? And then we also look at what Buddhism says. So here you can see some kind of something little bit artificial really, because we have to keep that in our mind, because whenever we try to understand Buddhism through Western philosophical categories, we are looking from that particular perspective and looking at different aspects. But if you take the teaching of the Buddha basically in order to realize nirvana, we have to know about the knowledge and then also the conduct, vijja and charana. Now this vijja and charana in Buddhism cannot be separated. But when we study like this, actually we are kind of separating charana from vijja. Charana is the behavior and vijja is knowledge. So in ethics we are more concerned about behavior or charana. In epistemology we are more concerned about knowledge, vijja. Okay? But in Buddhism proper, vijja and charana cannot be separated. Okay, so that you have to keep in your mind. Buddha never taught only ethics. What Buddha taught is completely ethical system. Okay, so in these discussions sometimes you may get little bit confused, because we are looking at certain categories from Western philosophy and also then certain aspects of Buddhist philosophy. So it is a combination. Now I ask you to read Professor Premasari's this booklet, which covers all the major aspects in related to Buddhist ethics. But then again, when we approach the issue from ethical point of view, as a category in modern Western philosophy, we are making certain arbitrary or artificial, the limitations. Okay, so that you have to keep in mind. Now, the way we started this discussion, we started discussion defining what ethics is, and then also looking at these two categories, normative ethics and meta-ethics. Now, normative ethics and meta-ethics, basically two categories we find in Western philosophy, okay? But when we say normative ethics, norms means things, the principles, basic things, things to be observed. Those are the norms. Now, basically, any list of sila come under the normative ethics, norms. Now, usually norms you get in religions, like in Christianity you get 10 commandments. In Buddhism you get sila, pancha sila, atthanga sila, dasa sila, samanera sila, upasampada sila. You know, we have all types of silas. So these are all norms. And then we have meta-ethics. Now, meta-ethics means basically in Western philosophy, meta-ethics means discussing about ethics. Now, when we say normative ethics, we just say, okay, these are the precepts, these are the things to be observed. In meta-ethics, we ask, why do we have to observe these things? Now, that question belongs to meta-ethics. We say, don't kill. Okay, that is normative ethics. But then we can ask, why should not we kill? Why it is wrong? Now, these questions belong to meta-ethics, okay? So, now when we look at what the Buddha taught, in fact, we find these both categories in the teaching of the Buddha. Buddha giving us normative ethics, okay, this is how you should behave, and at the same time explaining why we should do these things. Right? Now, if you take, later you can see Ambalatthika Rahulavada Sutta, where Buddha says, you know, if something is harmful to you, harmful to the other, harmful to both, you know, you should not do that. Now, that is something related to meta-ethics, you know, why we should not do certain things. What is the criterion of not doing certain things? So you see these two categories, normative ethics and meta-ethics, we basically a category that is in Western philosophy. Now in Western philosophical ethics, they are not really concerned about normative ethics. The philosophical aspect is they are more concerned about meta-ethics. Now meta-ethics means they are concerned about more on the ethical systems, why ethical systems are valid, why certain things are good, why certain things are bad, what are the criteria of good and bad, why do we have to obey rules. You know, all these things are meta-ethics. So they consider religion to be giving us normative ethics, norms. But philosophers' function is to analyze why these things are there. Why do we have to obey these things? Why do we have to follow these things? Now, such questions belong to meta-ethics. But when you look at the teaching of the Buddha, Buddha's discourses, we always have these both aspects. For example, the first precept, Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadan Samadhiyami says, I undertake to observe the precept of not killing. Then the question is, why you should not kill? In fact, when you read the Dhamma, you can see that why we should not kill, there are so many reasons given by the Buddha. Like one reason is we should not kill anybody because we love our life so much. If we love our life so much, then others also love their life so much. So we should not deprive that. So, you know, that type of the reasoning is given. Now, normative ethics are there, and then normative ethics are explained why we should not do that. So, why we should not kill, there are reasons for that. Everybody loves their life. So, you should not deprive any person or any animal or anybody of their life. Okay? And also nobody likes pain. So we should not give any pain. You kill a person, it is a painful thing. But we don't like pain. Nobody likes pain. So, like that, there are many reasons given. And in a very ordinary level, we will say that you should not kill because you will go to hell after your death. But of course, that is not the major reason. That also is there. If you steal, if you kill, you will go to, you will be born in a bad place. But apart from that, there are reasons given why we should obey the moral rules. So, normative ethics and meta-ethics, when you separate one from the other, that we do according to Western philosophical analysis. But in Buddhism, we can see both these aspects in the teaching of the Buddha. There are certain teachings, certain things Buddha said that are relevant to normative ethics, all types of ethical systems, and then meta-ethics means the philosophical discussion on those things. Now, in Buddhism, when we talk about ethics, ethics basically concerned about what is good and bad and what is right and wrong. So there are right and wrong things and there are good and bad things. Now, Sila basically as precepts, Sikha, is relevant to what is right and wrong. Okay? And then when we go further, why do we have to behave according to these things? Because ultimately we are trying to achieve something good. The highest good, highest happiness is nirvana. So we try to achieve that. So you can see that what is good and bad and what is right and wrong are also connected. Okay? So Sila, in a way we can say ethics. But Sila is not completely, ethics has much more to it. Sila is included ethics, and also ethics has much more to it. Ultimately, what is good, what is most desirable to human beings, now that also is considered in ethics. Okay? So, Sila according to the discourses and according to Visuddhimagga, something we discussed in detail. Now, important thing is this, Sila according to the discourses and Sila according to Visuddhimagga. Now, Visuddhimagga, I am sure you are familiar. The Visuddhimagga has been constructed, this monumental work by Buddhaghosa, according to the scheme of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Right? Then we have Satta Visuddhi. Sila Visuddhi comes under Sila. Chitta Visuddhi comes under Samadhi, and then other Visuddhis, 5 Visuddhis come under Panya. So we have Sila. So when you look at Visuddhimagga, you find definition of Sila, what is Sila, King Silang, Kenattena Silang, what is Sila, in which sense Sila is Sila, and then what are the categories and classifications of Sila. So we have many categories like 1, 2s, 3s, 4s, and like that categories of the 1 type of Sila, 2 type of Sila, 3 types of Sila, 4 types of Sila, and so on. So we have various different classifications of Sila in the Visuddhimagga, but according to discourses, we can see that Sila, Samadhi, Panya is the first step of the path. Okay? Now, when we take Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Sila is the first step. From Sila, we go to Samadhi. From Sila and Samadhi, we go to Panya. Okay? So, Sila, Samadhi, Panya is basically the path. So, in that sense, actually, here I did not mention it. Later we discussed the connection between Sila and the Vinaya. Okay? Now, Sila, Samadhi, Panya is the path, but Vinaya are the rules. In fact, we know that in the Buddhist tradition, Vinaya rules came later. According to the text, Buddha started establishing Vinaya rules after 20 years. So up to 20 years, there were no rules. Then how was the Sangha organization conducted? In fact, it happened according to the Sila. So although the Vinaya rules were not there, Sila was there. Okay? So Sila was there from the very beginning. There is no doubt about that. But Vinaya rules are based on Sila. The difference is, if you violate Sila, there is no punishment. But if you violate Vinaya, Vinaya means rules. So if you violate a rule, then you have a punishment. So that is the basic difference. So in other words, subsequently later period, the Sangha needed some kind of legal system. But at the beginning period, everybody was observing Sila. So there was no problem. But when subsequently with different people coming into Sasana with different purposes, with new situations and problems, some kind of legal system was required. So that is Vinaya. Okay? Now, when you look at Sila, basically Sila Samadhi Panya, Tisso Sikha, now that is basically the path to Nirvana. However, Vinaya Pitaka is basically based on that, but Vinaya Pitaka gives us a legal structure. Okay. Now, Visuddhimagga is really the elaboration of Sila. Visuddhimagga doesn't talk much about the Vinaya aspect. Of course, it does, but the main emphasis in Visuddhimagga is basically Sila as the first step of the path. Okay. So, now, Sila and Vinaya come at one aspect of ethics, and then we have Punya and Papa, Kusala and Nakusala, another aspect. Now, Punya and Papa, Kusala and Nakusala, we are talking about morally good and morally bad. Okay? Now, again, I tried to show you, now, if you read Professor Premsari's this booklet, you can be clearer about it. There is a very important difference between Punya Papa and Kusala Kusala. Sometimes in the text, even in the discourses, these two sets of concepts are used without much distinction. But there is a distinction. Because when we say Kusala Akusala, it basically refers to when we have Lobha Dosa Moha, that is Akusala. And absence of Lobha Dosa Moha is considered to be Kusala. So that is basically the idea of Kusala and Nakusala. Lobha Dosa Moha, Alobha Dosa Moha. However, Punya and Papa are basically the behavior. Behavior can be physical behavior, mental behavior, and also verbal behavior. Otherwise, we talk about three doors. Physical, verbal, and also mental. Kayadwara, Vachidwara, and Manodwara. So with these doors, with these avenues, we behave in certain manner, so these things are called Punya and Papa. But the important thing is the Punya and Kusala are connected, but of course when we say we do Punya, we still can have Lobha in that. Difference in Kusala we don't have Lobha, but in Punya we can have Lobha. So that is the difference. Now that is why an Arahant is not performing any Punya, because Arahant doesn't have a Lobha. So whatever Arahant does is we can say Kusala. So the Kusala is basically a very important psychological analysis. Whether you have Lobha Dosa Moha or whether you don't have Lobha Dosa Moha. Punya and Papa are basically different from that. So I think I explained to you earlier when we were discussing, we can say if you say something to be akusala, we can say all the papa is akusala. And all, but all akusalas are not papa. Okay? All akusalas are not papa because as the ordinary putujjana people, we have lobha dosa moha always. But that doesn't come to a papa. Right? Now, whenever you eat or drink something, for example, with desire, now there is a lobha in that. But as ordinary people, I mean, we eat things with some kind of desire, isn't it? People eat chocolate with desire. I see very often you munching something in the class. So you do that with, you have a desire. But that is not a papa. Okay? That is not a papa because if, when we eat something with desire, if that is a papa, then we will be committing so much papa. But that is only akusala really. But our ordinary putujjana behavior can have the akusala, something unskillful, because so long as it has lobha dosa moha, but they are not papa. Okay. Now in the same manner, you can say take punya and kusala. Actually the punya can be alone again with lobha. Now you can give a dana, even the dana, giving can be guided by lobha. If you want to be born in the heaven, you give something. But then you are motivated by some kind of desire. But motivated by desire, you make some donation. So there is lobha and alobha both in that. Okay. Now punya can be guided by lobha. Now kusala is not guided by lobha. Okay. So now if you take kusala and punya together, we can say that whenever your kusala, actually it has punya aspect, but punya may not have kusala aspect always. So that kind of connection. But these two sets of concepts are kusala, akusala and punya papa are very important in the Buddhist tradition. So when we talk about ethics in Buddhism, on the one hand we are talking about the sila. That is basically a normative ethics. And then when we talk about punya papa and kusala kusala, we are talking about what is good and what is bad. Okay. So these, what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, these are interconnected but different subjects. Okay. Now this aspect we have been looking at in our discussions. And then moving further, significance of taking into consideration oneself, the other and both, atta, para, ubhaya. Associated with that, we also looked at utilitarianism and liberal individualism. And also we discussed self-sacrifice. Now, in Ambalattika Rahulovada Sutta, Buddha says, Neva tabhyabhadaya, na parabhyabhadaya, na ubhyabhyabhadaya. So, whenever you do something, it should be not harmful for oneself, the other and both. Now, what is the significance of this? Oneself, other and both. When you put yourself and other in certain ethical considerations on par, on a similar position, it is very interesting ethically, because there are certain things you have to consider your moral development also. In other words, you cannot do something morally harmful to you, thinking that it is helpful to the others. So you have to really take care of your own moral development also. So that is atta. But if it is a amisa, if it is something to do with something worldly, material thing, then it is even okay if you lose something, you do something good to the other, right? If you find somebody, some person more hungry than you give a meal to that person. So you stay without meal, starving. But that is acceptable but if you try to do something good to others by harming morally to you, then of course that is not acceptable. So that is why in certain respects you have to consider both atta and para together. Okay. So in certain situations, you have to really look after yourself. Now, this story about acrobat, I told you, two acrobats, they are playing on very high on a rope. So if you make one mistake, you fall down and you kill yourself. In that story, the teacher says to his apprentice, his pupil, in this game, in this dangerous game, you protect me and I protect you. In this way, we will do this. Then apprentice says, pupil says, no. In this very dangerous game, you protect yourself, I protect myself. That apprentice's response seems to be, the closer to what the Buddha says. Actually, when you look after yourself properly, the other person look after himself properly, you both look after each other. But idea is that without looking after yourself, you try to look after other person, then you are losing the game. Okay? But when you look at it superficially, you feel that, yeah, that is correct. I protect him, he protect me. It looks okay. But philosophically considering, according to the teaching of the Buddha, that is not proper always. You have to really take care of yourself. So, this atta para, the limit, how much we can go to help others. Can we really try to help others without helping ourselves? This is a very important question in the Dhamma. In one of the discourses, Buddha says, attana palipanno, parang palipannang uddharissamiti netang thanang vijjati. When you are in the mud up to your neck, how can you help somebody else who is in the mud in the same manner? You can't, right? So you have to come out of your mud in order to help others, okay? So this is the idea. So the Theravada Buddhism, you have this idea. So you have to get out of it first, and then only you can help other person, okay? Now if a person is drowning, if you are also drowning, you can't help, So then you have to purify yourself. This concept we discussed fairly in detail, but this is something you need to be thinking more, because that's an important philosophical problem. Associated with that, we have utilitarianism and liberal individualism. Now similarly, utilitarianism holds that any action is good. The criterion is depending on whether it produces more happiness for more people, maximum happiness for maximum number of people. But liberal individualism is more on the person, individual. So it concerns about the person, individuality, not about others. So utilitarianism considers others. Liberal individualism concerns more on oneself. Now, these are two different, of course, political views, but associated with very much closely with human behavior. Now, important thing is actually, again, looking from a Buddhist point of view, we can see that the truth is that in certain sense, we have to look for the larger majority of the people, who gets what. But then on the other hand, what about yourself, your position? Can we completely sacrifice your life for the sake of others? According to Buddhism, No, because you also have to safeguard your life. There can be situations where you sacrificing your life is okay. But again, as an ethical position, you have to be careful how to articulate. Now that is why we discuss self-sacrifice. Now for greater things, there are instances where people sacrifice their life. But then that has to be really justifiable only depending on the case. Okay? It is not totally rejected in Buddhism, but in Buddhism what is more appreciated is really you safeguard your life and then try to help others. But on the other hand, self-sacrifice is mentioned. So in certain situations, it is acceptable that you sacrifice your life. Now in the paramita, we have this paramattha paramita. In the paramattha paramita, you practice paramita in the paramattha level without considering really your life. So that doesn't mean that you kill yourself or you sacrifice your life, but even at the risk of your life, you try to do certain things at the risk of your life. So maybe in the process you will lose your life. So that could happen. So that is acceptable in Buddhism. But those things are really very important to decide on what situation, in what conditions that it is acceptable. So this the whole issue of oneself and other, self and other, what are the limits, how much we should pay attention to the other, how much we should pay attention to oneself, on what type of matters, those things have to be determined. So the general rule seems to be that if some material loss is happening to you by trying to help others, I think that is okay. But if you think that you can help others or guide others while you are morally not up to that standard, according to the teaching of the Buddha, you can't do that really, although you think. But then, although I say this, again, we have the sometimes bodhisattva idea, particularly in the Mahayana literature. We have that bodhisattvas can do even wrong things in order to get people into the right path. But that idea, again, we need to be very carefully addressed. The stories are there, they say that, the literature says that bodhisattva will do wrong thing in order to get the people who do wrong things in the right path. But can somebody do wrong things in order to get someone to the right path? That remains the philosophical issue, we have to think about, okay? So, these are some of the interesting issues that come out from these discussions. And you can see that, we don't have hard and fast answers. You can't say, give a definitive answer, no, it is like this. Because, depending on situations. So, that is one challenge in ethical studies. In ethical studies, you don't have like mathematical type answers. In mathematics, you have get clear, definitive answers. But in ethics, you don't get that type of answers. And then we also discussed bioethics. We looked at euthanasia and also we looked at suicide. It was very interesting. These are called, these issues are discussed under bioethics. And when we particularly look at the Vinaya literature, you can see that there are many relevant instances to euthanasia and bioethics. Even the Parajika, Manusaviggaha Parajika has quite many incidences connected to these things, okay? So, therefore, we can really analyze euthanasia and suicide, both according to Dhamma and the Vinaya. And also we discussed cases like Venerable Godika's case, Venerable Channa's case, where they committed suicide. But then in the process, they attained Arahanthood. Because both Venerable Godika and Venerable Channa, when they committed suicide, actually they were very developed people. It's not like very ordinary Pratajjana. And then particularly on Venerable Godika's case, we are told that he was attaining this, what is called Samayikang Cheto Vimutti. Okay? Samayika Cheto Vimutti. Samayika means time-based or temporary. He attains Cheto Vimutti, but he cannot retain it. So finally he commits suicide. But then in the process, of course, he becomes an Arahant. And interestingly, in the Vinaya, we don't have a Vinaya rule against suicide. Some people interpret, particularly commentary and the Milinda Panya, interpret na bhikkhave attanang pate tabbang, pateti, attanang pateti. But the literal meaning of attanang pateti and also the story associated with that is a monk jump off the cliff. So attanang pateti. But the method of suicide is only not one method, right? You can commit suicide in many ways. So attanang pateti is only one method, you can commit suicide. But in that particular case, of course, he did not die. Unfortunately, he fell on somebody, that person died. Okay. So, this is another interesting thing in the Vinaya, why we don't have a rule or precept against suicide. Okay. But if we interpret na bhikkhave attanang pate tabbang, yes, we can say that there is a rule. But anyhow, I wanted to show you whether there is a rule or not. Suicide according to Buddhism is not acceptable because human life is so important. Now, such an important human life, if you destroy for no reason, arbitrarily, that is not acceptable to Buddhism because suicide means killing yourself. Whether we kill ourselves or not, we are going to die one day. So the death is there. We don't have to do that. It will come to us naturally. So if death is coming to us naturally, if we bring death artificially, arbitrarily, that is not accepted in Buddhism. And also we can see that according to Vinaya rules, helping someone to commit suicide is a serious offense. If it is Upasampada bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, he or she can be guilty of parajika. Now, helping someone to commit suicide is, if so bad, committing suicide is also should be bad, right? So, although there is no particular Vinaya rule, we can conclude that the suicide is not in accordance with Buddhism. Finally, we discussed environmental crisis and environmental ethics. Now, this issue, particularly the environmental crisis, is something new. Okay. Now, somebody can say, how can there be anything in Buddhism? Because during the time of the Buddha, there was no such thing called environmental crisis. Of course, it is true. But on the other hand, when you look at the environmental crisis as a man-made problem, now all the problems are man-made. Now, man-made problems mean ultimately at the bottom of these problems is, we can say, lobha dosa moha, right? Now, if some action is generating from lobha dosa moha, we can say Buddhism has quite a lot to say about it. Okay, so whether environmental crisis is a new problem, it doesn't matter because these new problems arise from very universal causes, basically akusala. So now if the environmental problem or any new problem arises due to human action or human behavior, then of course we can say that Buddhism is applicable to such situations. So we found that environmental crisis as a man-made problem, environmental ethics we can develop based on the teaching of the Buddha. In fact, under bioethics we can discuss abortion and many other things. In the same manner, environmental ethics also has many aspects. Particularly in our discussion, we did not have really much time to go into detail. We discussed very briefly issues like social ecology and deep ecology and ecofeminism. But each of these subjects is very broad. There is quite a lot of literature on these subjects. Okay, so what we really did was very the limited type of discussion. So I do not really want to say that we looked at these questions comprehensively. No, we could not. But my purpose was introduce these problems to you so that you can keep on reading and develop your own thinking. Okay, this is just basically some of the I would say almost all the main issues we discussed under ethics. Okay, now do you have any questions or anything further clarification regarding Buddhist ethics, our discussions? Yes, yes.
Someone has said a lot of sorrow at the time he went to die to
So,
found it to be temporary, not to do suicide. He had a lot of worry regarding business or communication. He had a lot of sorrow.
a lot of what?
A lot of sorrow, worry. Soka.
Okay.
You have a lot of soka for many cases. At the time, he had to usually suicide.
Okay.
At the time, how should we anchor not to do suicide?
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, I could not get that initially. Suicide is can be really the serious problem, and in many societies, particularly younger people have a more tendency to commit suicide than the elderly people. But in many parts of the world, in some cultures, suicide rate is relatively much higher than other countries. So the particularly when you have very competitive way of life, and also in society when you don't have anyone to talk to you and anyone to counsel you. So there are a number of prominent causes why people commit suicide. Actually, this is one area where counseling can be developed according to Buddhism. Okay. Now, the counseling is quite popular in many parts of the world. Counseling is developed as some kind of methodical scientific practice today. But if you take traditional societies like Burmese society, where large number of Buddhist monks are there, also Siales are there. Now elders are there. So, they are the people who could really do a great service to the society. Now, if you look at phenomenon like suicide, I cannot really articulate all the ideas here because, that is a vast thing. But the Buddhism has both insights and also practices. Both. Insight means, the Dhamma, knowledge we can use to teach these people. And also particularly in a country like Myanmar where, the emphasis on Abhidhamma is very much. Now, emphasis on Abhidharma means emphasis on the mind. Now, ultimately, suicide is a problem of mind, really. You come to a situation where you think that you cannot go anymore. So, it is psychological problem ultimately. What causes the psychological problem may be economic problem or any other problem. You failed the examination, you could not get a job, economic situation is so bad. So you decide to commit suicide. But committing suicide itself is a psychological thing. Ultimately because, you are not the only person who has failed the examination. Why only some people commit suicide, others not? You are not the only person who did not get the job. But all those people who got the job don't commit suicide. Only some people. So then we must be able to show them, ultimately this is in your mind. This is in your attitude. So you have to fix your mind. So, it has to be really developed based on Buddhism. Okay. Now there are many organizations and associations in the world who have developed these things, particularly based on the teaching of the Buddha. In Sri Lanka, in fact, actually, there is an organization in which I am also involved. We develop counseling for various cases. So among which one is, the suicide. So number of cases can be greatly reduced if we really use the insights correctly. Okay. Anything else you want to discuss further about ethics? Yes. Yeah.
And then these three, one at least is more important than our own life and my life.
Well, actually, when we say normative ethics and meta-ethics, normative ethics are the principles we follow. But then it is very difficult to say which one is more important because now you follow certain principles, but you have to know why you follow those principles. Now the meta-ethics is really the discussion about criteria. Why do we follow those things? So actually both are interconnected. Now when we say that, don't kill, we have to know why killing is wrong. Otherwise, we are not really observing the precept meaningfully. Simply you can say, you can do something, okay, book says don't do it. So you do it. Your teacher says, okay, don't do it. But the meaningful observance of sila always need for you to know why is sila. Okay. Now you can be observing precepts, but you also have to know why. Why do you do that? Why should not we steal things? Why should not we kill another person? All these things. Why should we do these things? But particularly in the monastic tradition, we follow many rules. We have to see that the meaning of those rules. Otherwise, we are just following. So therefore, both normative ethics and meta-ethics are interconnected. Okay. So we cannot say which one is more important. I can say something like this: normative ethics, only norms without meta-ethical discussion is something like blind, okay? Because you have the rules, but you don't know why. But on the other hand, you know why, but you don't have rules, then it becomes empty, because you don't have sila. But of course you know the meaning of sila, but it is not helpful. You have to be also observing sila. So you have to observe sila, and also you have to know why you observe sila. So two cannot be separate from each other in that sense. Okay, so that is the idea. Okay. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
So, I want to know, so every country is the government or institution has a governing law and Buddha two laws. As a Buddhist, Buddhist people, the Buddha law is very important. There are other countries, other religions, man-made law and original consort of two laws.
Right.
Consort of potency.
Okay. So your question is about man-made law and the Buddhist law, Buddha's law. In fact, in societies today, we have these, particularly the legal system is today in the many parts of the world is coming from with the influence of Western tradition. Okay, because if you take this country, Myanmar, this country has been under the British rule, and the modern judiciary system was introduced in the 19th century to this country by British. Same thing with many other countries where colonialism was there. And even apart from that, even colonialism was not there because of the globalization. We are living in a larger world. Legal traditions from different countries, influence each other. So in our countries we have modern legal system. But when you take say the Buddha's law or the Buddhist law, in our countries we always had the secular law, but the secular law before the colonial period was much closer to the traditional Buddhist law, right? But with the colonial rule, the legal system we got is basically Western. It is influenced by Christianity, Judaism, and all these West traditions. So we got a different type of legal system. Now the important thing is when we say Buddha's law or the Buddhist law, very often what we consider to be the Buddhist law is more relevant to certain ideas. But the day-to-day things, the modern legal system can be more relevant. However, importantly, what can the Buddhist law do is really the modern law, legal system can be enriched by Buddhist doctrine, okay? Because some of the Buddhist law may not be applicable today, because in the modern society is different, okay? Particularly modern society is different. But now within the Sangha, if you take, we can say Vinaya practices are there. But even in the Sangha, if a member of the Sangha violates any what is called general violation related to the society, then you can't practice the Buddhist law because you are under the secular law. So there are limitations because we don't have really completely a Buddhist legal system for everything. Now the case of Islam is different. Islam is trying to what is called Sharia law. They try to have develop Sharia law for all the situations, okay? But in the Buddhist tradition we have not done that because always if you take the Buddhist tradition, the king and the people were separate, the Sangha was separate. Sangha was organized by Sangha life was organized by the Vinaya rules. But the ordinary people was king. Okay? But what happened in the Buddhist countries, the kings and the rulers were influenced by the teaching. So therefore, the certain rules, the nature of the rules was different. Certain rules became mild. For example, capital punishment or amputating hands or things like that are not very encouraged in the Buddhist teaching. So as a result, in these legal systems, the influence by Buddhism, you don't have these things. So influence of Buddhism is there. But Buddhism has not developed a total secular legal system. The legal system that is in the Vinaya Pitaka is basically for the monks and nuns. It doesn't go beyond monks and nuns, okay? So in that sense, the legal system, the Buddhist legal system is basically for the monks and nuns. But from the philosophy, secular legal systems have been influenced by Buddhism in the Buddhist countries. Now, I think Burma is also example. As you know, there is what is called Raja Tats and Dhamma Tats. So Raja Tats is the secular thing, Dhamma Tats is Dhamma. So pre-colonial period, there was a combination, between the two things. But with the colonialism, this situation changed. Okay, so we are following two different systems. But within the Buddhist monastic tradition, Vinaya is there. So what can happen is, what really happened is, in these countries where traditionally Buddhism practiced, there can be certain influences from Buddhism. So that way, even the modern law, when it comes to the practice, you can say that there are certain changes. Not completely, we have never had a total secular legal system developed based on Buddhism, no. Yes.
Euthanasia is wrong action. On the other hand, a woman, a story, a woman, he feared the pain at the time he went to, he did not stay in this life. He asked the doctor to do, doctor also like this, as she said. Mm-hmm. In this life, the woman be born in one family, or moreover, he remember about in the past life. And then he asked the daughter, he thank you, daughter, because he do the license. And so, in fact, their family are not Buddhism. And so we can recall, it is daughter is Spanish or whether it is social work. I cannot decide that it is euthanasia. On the other hand, it is social work. Because a woman, he want to like this life.
Yes, thank you. The issue, similar issue associated with euthanasia, you have to really decide case by case, okay? But if you take something to be euthanasia, as we found in our discussions, basically there are two conditions. One condition is the person must be in severe pain. Okay, that is one condition. The other thing is the killing is done on purposely. Because you know that what you are doing is you do it to terminate the life. If you don't want to use the term killing, you are terminating the life. So the person has to do that in order to terminate the life. That can be done only when a person is in acute pain. So these are the two conditions. Now according to medical ethics and according to general ethics, doing this without the consent of the patient is considered to be a murder. So in many countries, in nowhere it is approved really. But in some countries, if the patient asks, like what you said, I can't bear this pain, in my life, then with the patient consent, you do that. That comes under euthanasia. But that is approved only in some countries, not all over the world. So basically, euthanasia is not accepted in that sense. Okay, but what happens is like your own life. But then it is not suicide, it's not a euthanasia, but more to suicide. So if you have pain, then if you stop taking medicine, if you stop taking meals, then of course you are gradually causing yourself to die. That is a possibility. Or you can ask social worker or the medical person to remove your tube and stop your machinery, that sort of thing. So those are really borderline cases where it looks like somewhat of a suicide, but at the same time it is not really a suicide. So it is very, very carefully we have to decide. In my discussion, I showed you, according to the commentary, there are certain situations where you discontinue eating, discontinue taking medicine. You remember that example when there are so many people taking care of you, but your illness is not going down. People who take care of you are also tired. Now it takes a long time. Now in such a situation, the patient can decide what to do. That is not considered to be suicide. But euthanasia case is very, challenging. What we can approve, seem to be approvable is, what is called negative euthanasia. Like, removing the tubes and, stopping eating and, things like that. But not any kind of positive thing. Like, if you give an injection, then you are doing something positively to terminate life. That is not accepted. So again, euthanasia, suicide, these are very vague areas. No clear-cut answer. It depends on the situation. Now in some religion, even Jainism, they have that when they think that the life is enough, they simply stop eating. Then gradually they die. But of course that's a suicide, right? But then although that is suicide, it is up to you whether you want to eat or not. If you think that life is useless anymore, you terminate it. So sorry, it is very difficult to give a definitive answer. Okay. All right. Let me take. Oh, you have one more question. Okay. Okay.
I know one of the greatest movement figures from modern Kenya. This man called Why. I'm not why. Why. For why, ethics and morality should be free from religion.
Okay.
Now we study modality or religion. About the statement between and the concept. I would like to know your opinion on you or the why.
Okay. Thank you, Venerable, for that question. This question is about whether religion and morality should be separate from each other, right? Actually, that's an interesting observation because usually religions are understood, religions have some type of ethics, okay? But then when you take morality and ethics, religious ethics is not the only ethics. There can be other systems of ethics too. But the one problem with religious ethics is in order to follow that ethics, that system of ethics or morality, you have to believe in that religion. Now, if you don't believe in that religion, then there's a good possibility that you don't follow that ethics. So, the people can become without ethics. Now, let me give you an example. Now, say for example, suppose, any theistic religion will say that ethical system comes from God. 10 commandments were given by God. And then according to theistic religions, why do you be ethical? Because God has given these rules. Okay? Now that is religious ethics. But the problem is, if you don't believe in the existence of God, then you don't follow the ethics. That is the danger. So actually, if you take Buddhist ethics, now when you take Buddhist ethics, now for example, when the Buddha says, don't do anything if it's harmful to you, harmful to other, harmful to both. Now, that is not necessarily Buddhist, right? I mean, it is not connected to any religion in that sense. Although Buddha said that, it is a very broad thing. Now, Buddha says that don't do anything with the polluted mind. Now, that is again, anybody can accept that. So, you can see that the issue is when ethics is, connected to religion, sometimes it is problematic. Because if people don't believe in the religion, then they also reject ethics. So then society becomes without ethics, without morality. But on the other hand, if ethics has a different foundation, now I see in Buddhism, of course, you follow Sila in order to attain Nirvana. But apart from that, there is also morality. You can follow without thinking about Nirvana. Now, the Buddha's advice, don't do anything, something that causes harm to you, other and both, that has not directly related to Nirvana. So, even without being a Buddhist, you can be ethical, according to that teaching. So, this distinction between religious ethics and, the ordinary morality, ordinary ethics is something very important. So my opinion is actually for the ordinary society, there must be, it is good to have a system of ethics not directly connected to any religion. Because if we can agree on, basic principles of morality. Now, for example, take 5 precepts. 5 precepts have nothing to do with any religion actually. So whether you have a religion or not, if people observe 5 precepts, that will be a good society. Okay. So the question you raised, this connection is something very important. So my own personal belief is, if ethics is connected to metaphysical things like existence of God or something like that, or existence of life after death, that ethics may not be universal. Because those people who don't believe in those things will not follow that ethics. Okay. So that's okay. Let me move into the next subject briefly and then conclude the session. So we move into the next one, world religions. And then actually in world religions we discussed, these are the main things we discussed in world religions. So we looked at theistic and non-theistic religions and their differences, the main characteristics of God according to theistic religions, the arguments given by theists to prove the existence of God, the Buddhist reasons for rejecting the concept of creator God, Abrahamic religions, similarities and differences among them, Jainism, it is similarities and differences from Buddhism, and also finally we concluded with discussion religion and women. So these are the main things we discussed under world religions. Okay, we started with theistic and non-theistic religions and their differences. Now theistic religions are basically Judeo-Christian tradition or Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Some aspects of Hinduism is also theistic, but some aspects of Hinduism are non-theist. So Hinduism is both. But basically when we say theistic religions, we consider what is called Abrahamic religions. So non-theistic religions is basically Buddhism is the most widespread religion among the non-theistic religions, but Jainism is also non-theist. In Hinduism, Advaita Vedanta is a non-theistic religion. So there are non-theistic religions. Now we discussing the main differences. Basically, when we say non-theistic religion, theistic religion, we talk about God-centered religion. At the center is God. So the belief in God is the most important thing in theistic religion. The God is considered to be the creator God. So the God who created the universe, God who created the human beings and the world and the other beings and everything. So the basic difference between theistic religions and non-theistic religions is belief in God. But when we say belief in God, of course it also includes everything happens according to the will of the God. So when we say belief in God, it is not simply believing in God. So everything happens according to the will of God. So we call it theistic determinism, some form of determinism. Things have been already determined by God. So when we say theistic religion, the central idea is God. Now God creates this world and then God has a plan. So everything happens according to the God's will. So this is the basic difference between theistic and non-theistic religion. Now in a non-theistic religion, where you don't have belief in God, now who is doing things? So in non-theistic religion, of course, the responsibility is on the person. In Buddhism, we say attahi attanonatho. One is one's own God. Okay, so you don't have any other God. Kohinatho parosiya. How can there be any other God? You are the only God. So now if we take it that manner, in the non-theistic religion, responsibility is up to you. In a theistic religion, responsibility is taken by God. And then accordingly there are differences. In a theistic religion, faith is the most important thing. And in the non-theistic religion, wisdom is the most important thing. But it doesn't mean that faith is not there. Faith is there, but wisdom is more important. Knowledge is more important. In the non-theistic religions, ultimately, it is through knowledge that you attain liberation. In a theistic religion, it is through faith. In Buddhism, panyaya parisujjati. Okay, panyaya parisujjati. You get purified out of wisdom. So wisdom, knowledge. So these are the basic categories. The main characteristics of God according to theistic religions, I think we discussed this aspect in detail. Omniscience, omnipotent. Omniscience means God knows everything. Omnipotent, God is capable of doing anything. And omnibenevolent, God is kind. Those are. And then there are also other attributes of God. Omnipresence of God, God is infinite, and so on. Then we have basic characteristics and attributes of God, the main characteristics. Then we discuss arguments given by theists to prove the existence of God. I'm not going to go into details of those things, but we discuss several arguments from design. And I think we started discussing ontological argument. We define God as the perfect being. Now if God is perfect being must exist. Otherwise, argument says there is no point of somebody being perfect. So you define God in certain manner, and then according to that definition you say God exists. But then we again found, not only us, even the Western philosophical traditions themselves have found that this argument is not satisfactory, because by defining something in such a manner, you can't prove the existence. Existence is an empirical thing. If you want to prove the existence, you have to show that, look, that is the person there. You can touch him, talk to him, or person is there. But you simply try to prove the existence with argument is, the failure. So that is ontological argument. But apart from ontological argument, we had several other arguments. You remember the argument from design. That was a argument that is used by many God-centered religious people. They say that you look at the world, this world has been created according to some kind of design. So world has a design. So, that idea, like if you look at a watch is not arbitrary, watch has been made by somebody. In the same manner, this world is designed by someone. So that person who designed world is God. Now, the planets and the stars go in perfect orbits and, without any deviation. All these things are taken as examples of design of God. Okay, and also we had the arguments from first cause, uncaused cause, God as the first cause in the universe, and then unmoved mover, God as the person who moves everything. So, this kind of different sets of arguments. Then we also had the argument called teleological argument, like the God created this world for a purpose. So, all of us, including animals, trees and plants, everything is moving to achieve this purpose determined by God. So that is a teleological argument. So, we discussed many arguments like that. And then also we looked at Buddhist reasons for rejecting the concept of creator God. Now, what are the Buddhist arguments? Why Buddhism rejects the existence of God? Now, one basic argument is, according to Buddhism, everything is dependently arisen, paticcasamuppanna. Now, there cannot be anything that is not paticcasamuppanna, that is not dependent on other things. Now, God is defined as independent, transcendental being. But according to Paticcasamuppada teaching, there cannot be such a being. Okay? Now, that is the basic argument. And then also I refer to Mahabodhi Jataka, where Mahabodhi Jataka, you have these stories like particularly argument from suffering. If God is all benevolent, how could have he created this world which is full of suffering? So, that argument against the concept of God presented by many people. So, argument from suffering and an argument based on the Paticcasamuppada. Okay? And also I showed you if you look at the Four Noble Truths and the Buddhist path, that shows that there is no God. If there is God, you must be able to get help from the God in order to achieve nirvana. But in Buddhism, there is no one to help you to achieve nirvana. Of course, Buddha and the others can teach you how to do that, guide you, but they can't do that. Okay. So, the structure of the Four Noble Truths, I said, indication that there is no God. Okay, because Four Noble Truth is something to be practiced by us. If God exists, then we don't need to do like that. We can pray for God, get that, try to get that, So, okay, now we discussed those things in detail, and then we looked at Abrahamic religions, similarities and differences among them. Abrahamic religions are basically Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Those three are called Abrahamic religions because they have Abraham as the main, the person. And then the idea was that God had covenant, which means agreement with Abraham to make Abraham's people great in the world. And then Abraham's people to believe in God as only one God, that is the covenant. And then within the three religions, if you take Judaism, Christianity and Islam, in Judaism you have completely a monotheistic view, the view that there is only one God. And then Christianity, this view has become Trinity. Trinity means combination of three gods. this idea, Trinity, is problematic in the, Trinity. Trinity means three phenomena, Trinity. So, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, these three. Now, in the Christian theology, they are trying to show that although there is three, this three is actually one. Trinity, three aspects. Now, but Judaic tradition doesn't accept that, Islamic tradition doesn't accept that. So they have internal differences. Although all three traditions believe in Abrahamic God, Christian tradition has this idea of Trinity, which other two traditions do not see to be really monotheistic. So as a result, you can see Islamic tradition, which originated in the 7th century, is really reaffirming the monotheistic concept of God. Of course, the word used to God is Allah, and then in Hebrew tradition they use the word Yahweh, but it is the same one and only God. So from Judaism to Islam, we can see that the monotheistic concept of God is reaffirmed. So going back to the monotheistic concept. So we can see monotheism, Trinity, and again Islam monotheism. So these three concepts, theistic concepts are, this constitute one of the fundamental differences. Of course, there are many other differences in their practices and certain things. Even within Christian tradition, there are so many differences of practices. We don't need to go into these things very much. But in the Christianity today is the largest religion in the world, and they have they are different Roman Catholic and also Protestant the groups. So there are similarities and differences. We also discussed Jainism. It is similarities with and differences from Buddhism. Jainism is another non-theistic religion. Although it is not very big religion, it never went out of India for a long time. Now, of course, it also has gone out of India in European countries, in United States. You find it. Interesting thing is, there are similarities and differences between Buddhism, but the similarities are also very important. In my discussion yesterday, Buddhism and religion and women, I pointed out to you in the Bhikkhuni order, they also have Bhikkhuni order like Upasaka, Upasika, Bhikkhu, Bhikkhuni. These four groups are available in Jainism also. Okay. Now in Jainism too, the Bhikkhunis, however much elderly is the Bhikkhuni, that Bhikkhuni has to pay respect to the same day entered monk. This is both in Buddhism and Jainism. So, there are, like Vinaya-wise also there are similarities. Among the differences, both Jainism and Buddhism has a lot of similarities. Bhikkhu, Bhikkhuni, Upasaka, Upasika. That category is also available in Jainism. Actually, Jainism chronologically, time-wise, senior to Buddhism. Okay, Jainism had existed before Buddhism, but Buddhism became more widespread, and also Jaina literature had some problems. The Digambaras believe that original Jaina literature is lost, and so on. So again, the idea was to show you that Jainism is very important as a non-theistic religion, and also to understand Buddhism and the Buddhist Vinaya, Jainism can be important. Finally, we discussed religion and women. That was our last discussion. In that discussion, we wanted to highlight the role and the status of women in religion. Now, basically, we saw that all religions are, the religious teachers are men, not women. Okay. Now, and also all religions are like they belong to ancient pre-modern world. So in the pre-modern world, ancient world, we know that one main reason why women were not only religious leaders, women were not great scholars, nothing like that. Mainly because, in the ancient societies, anywhere in the world, women were kept domestic, they were not given education. So as a result, women developed to be, like caring only children and, looking after the household activities, only concerned about their physical beauty, nothing very much to be intellectual because society was like that. Now ancient India, women were just kept under men all the time. Now that happens in many. So not only theistic religions, non-theistic religions, under all these religions, basically you can see similar patterns. Women were not given very high positions. Okay, the reason we can see that women were kept away from education and those things. So as a result of, but how women are treated, what is the situation of women? So these are the things we discussed in under women. Now in Buddhism, I wanted to highlight to you that although Buddhism also shares certain Indian things. So in that sense, there are differences between. But on the other hand, intellectually, particularly intellectually, there is no difference between men and women. And in Buddhist tradition, both men and women can be arahants. That means can follow the path and ultimately realize the nirvana. So those are important things when we look from Buddhist point of view. Because if you contrast it with Jainism, according to Jainism, a woman cannot become a siddha. A woman has to be a man. Okay. Now in the Buddhist tradition, we have this belief that woman cannot become a Buddha. Woman has to become a man in order to become a Buddha. But that is again somewhat later belief. It is found only in the commentaries and the Jatakatta Katha, where they list the requirements to be a bodhisattva. Manusattang linga sampatti. So the linga sampatti means you have to be the correct gender. So these beliefs are also there in the Buddhist tradition too. But apart from that, within Buddhist tradition, we know that the bhikkhunis, the women, can attain nirvana. Now the Therigatha, this literature is remarkable. You don't find similar literature anywhere in the world. Where when you read Therigatha, you can see how many women entered the sasana and how they attained nirvana and their experience. So in that sense, although Buddhism shares with other Indian religions certain aspects, where women were kept under men, but soteriologically, realization nirvana-wise, of course, in Buddhism there is no difference. Now these were some of the main points we discussed under this subject. Okay, so do you have any questions or comments about these things? Anything you wish to know further? Yes, sir. Reverend, is like this, because when you take religions, religions have a lot of commonalities among all religions. When you say something is a religion, there are certain things shared by all religions. Like for example, there are rites and rituals, there are beliefs, there are doctrines, there are practices, there is clergy. There are so many things shared by all religions. Okay, so we cannot say that Buddhism is completely different from 100% different from some other religion. No, because when you say certain thing is a religion, as religions there are a lot of things we share. Okay, but there are major differences. That's why we say if you take theistic and non-theistic, then you can say belief in God is a character in many religions. But Buddhism doesn't believe in God. But of course, in that sense, not only Buddhism, Jainism doesn't believe in God, Advaita Vedanta doesn't believe in God. So my answer to your question is actually you cannot say two religions or any two religions are 100% different from each other. No. There are a lot of similarities, but there are fundamental differences. For example, believing in God or not believing in God. According to that belief, the path of purification, path to nirvana, path to the ultimate goal can also be different. So there are, I would say, significant, important difference, but not 100%. Because you know, I mean, you look at religions anywhere in the world, the religions, we have Poe days, other religions have Sabbath days. You know, like, so a lot of features are common. So when you say something is a religion, they share many things in common, okay? Any other thing? Yes, sir?
Some religions said that, don't do like that, don't do like that, this manner is not proper for us. Another religion said that, don't do like that, this action is proper for us, such as like that.
Okay.
That is why my question is, as a non-theistic pastor, what can be benefit?
Okay, I think your question is in different religions, there are different sets of ethics. Like, you know, one religion says, okay, this is good, you know, this is good. Another religion says, how do we know that? We can look at it from several points of view. One is, in the world, I think all the religions have certain very common things. Like if you take 5 precepts, although they are not described as 5 precepts, you find them in all religions. No religion will say that killing is good. No religion will say that stealing is good. So in other words, we could say that all religions share certain very basic rules of good behavior. Now, you know, 5 precepts are very basic. It's very basic to the society. But depending on the further development, morality becomes different. Now, for example, if you take Buddhism, for ordinary people, 5 precepts are there. But 5 precepts are not only for ordinary people, according to Buddhism, for everybody, including monks and nuns. Everybody has to be observing 5 precepts. Okay? Although the 3rd precept becomes abrahmacharya, but you know, the 5 precepts are there. So that is the universal moral, ethical, very general standard. But beyond that, you have upasampada sila. But upasampada sila, why? Because you have a particular goal. So my answer to your question is, at very ordinary level, lot of religions share similar type of norms. Don't do this type thing. But depending on next what you want to achieve, the sila becomes different. Now, if you are a monk, bhikkhu, trying to achieve nirvana, then you know you have a different sila. But that sila is not applicable to ordinary people. Okay, so it depends on, you know. So ultimately, the question what sila is better is not a very correct question. Okay, it depends on what purpose we are having sila. So the 5 precepts are good for everybody, any good society. But monastic sila is good for those people who have a higher goal to achieve. And in the same manner, but again, don't misunderstand me, because it doesn't mean that all the religions are the same or anything. But for example, if you take some religions, like, you know, the very big differences, Islamic religion, if you take, you know, if somebody goes against the religion, they kill you. So the killing is accepted very much in the Islamic tradition. Now, Buddhist tradition is totally different from that. Okay, so my personal belief is if any religion approves killing for the sake of religion, I think that religion has to be corrected, although it comes in the religion. Okay, so it doesn't mean so everything said to be correct by all religions are correct, because there are certain things we have to go by some universal standards. The killing is not good at all anyway. So things like that. So Venerable, the Sila, we can't say which Sila is better or which Sila is worse in some sense, because the Sila depends on what you try to achieve. So depending on your goal. Okay, then I think we will wind up for today, and so during this past almost 4 months, we discussed world religions and also we discussed Buddhist ethics. My purpose of discussing these things is to show you how much we need to know more. Okay, so don't think that you did so much in Buddhist ethics or world religions, but if you get an idea how much we need to know more, how much we need to read more, how much we don't know about these things, how less we know about these things, I think that is the main idea. So keep on reading, keep on thinking on these things. I wish you all good luck, and it was nice to have been able to discuss these matters with you. So thank you for participating. Okay, thank you very much.